Last week, where we ended up with the Ark of the Covenant, who remembers where it ended up? Remember, they carried it into... They carried it into Solomon's temple. So this is the last recorded place of the Ark of the Covenant. So I want to make that clear, because we're going to talk about things that could have happened to the Ark of the Covenant. But there's something else that happened with the Ark of the Covenant. You know, the Ark of the Covenant was where the glory of God, the Shekinah, would appear, where the priest would go in once a year on the Day of Atonement and meet with God and sprinkle the blood. Well, something happened. God's people, Israel, were worshiping other gods. They were disobedient. God just had it with them. He said, you just won't obey me. I've had it up to here. So you know what he did? He left. He said, I am out of here. He left that temple. And I'm going to read to you. This is in Ezekiel 9:9. And this is a prophecy that God is giving to Ezekiel. It said, the iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah is exceeding great, and the land is full of blood, and the city full of perverseness. For they say the Lord has forsaken the earth, and the Lord doesn't see. Well, none of that's true. The Lord hasn't forsaken the earth, and the Lord sees everything. They just didn't have any faith in God. And then in chapter 10, verse 4, it says, then the glory of the Lord went up from the cherub. You know, he was between the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, and stood over the threshold of the house. And the house, meaning the temple, was filled with the cloud. The cloud is the Shekinah. That's that glory, that brightness. The house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brightness of the Lord's glory. Then I'm going to go to verse 18. I'm going to tell you what happened with this cloud, how God left them. Then the glory of the Lord departed from off the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. Now these cherubim weren't the golden cherubim. These were ones who were waiting at the east gate. These were real live beings. Cherubim who were coming to take that glory and move it. And the cherubim lifted up their wings and mounted up from the earth in my sight. Then chapter 11, verse 22. And did the cherubim lift up their wings and the wheels beside them, and the glory of God of Israel was above them. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain which is on the east side of the city. The mountain that's on the east side of the city is the Mount of Olives. And then disappeared. But what is significant about him leaving from the Mount of Olives? Does that ring a bell to anybody?
Is it that where Jesus is going to come back though?
Okay, that is one really important thing. It's Zechariah 14:4. When Christ returns, you know he's returning to the Mount of Olives.
Right.
Okay, but there's something else. When he left this earth as a human being, he departed on the Mount of Olives.
Wow.
It's kind of like, you could say it's a portal. It's a special place where, first of all, this Shekinah departed. And then when Jesus was here, he departed from there. And when he returns, he's coming there. So now we've got the Ark of the Covenant. To get back to that, it's in the temple in Jerusalem. But something happens. In 597 BC, that's 597 years before Christ was born, these people were doing such bad things. They weren't keeping the Sabbath day. They were worshiping idols. So, I want to tell you what happens. God gave them a warning in Leviticus. These are the penalties of disobedience. And you're going to see this is exactly what happens to these people. I will scatter you among the heathen and will draw out a sword after you. Oh, this is Leviticus 26, 33 through 35. And your land shall be desolate and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land, even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when ye dwelt on it. Well, guess what happened? Not only were they disobedient and worshiping idols, they weren't keeping the Sabbath. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon, of Babylonia, the whole area. And it says that God called him my servant. What that says in Leviticus, he was going to have Nebuchadnezzar do that to his people. Chronicles 36 and verse 7. The reason why I'm telling you this story, I want you to know what happened to the stuff, all the stuff that they had made that was in the temple. And this is where it starts going. Nebuchadnezzar also carried off the vessels of the house of the Lord to Babylon and put them in his temple in Babylon for his gods. Verse 10, and when the year was expired, King Nebuchadnezzar spent and brought him to Babylon, that's Jehoiachin, with the goodly vessels of the house. So he was slowly depleting the house of God. Every time he came in there to do something, he would take more things. But this took years. They were done in waves. It wasn't like Nebuchadnezzar came in and just, oh, we're going to take the whole town. First of all, he took the princes. He took the best people. That's when he took Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they wanted to take the wise people, the people who were good craftsmen. Hey, they could use these people, right? So then King Nebuchadnezzar appoints Zedekiah to be king. And Zedekiah was king for 11 years. Then after 11 years, Zedekiah gets captured and a lot of bad things happen to him. But my point is, Zedekiah had so much time to do something with the Ark of the Covenant. There are so many caves, especially where the temple was. There's all kind of caves. He could have hidden that. Now I'm telling you about where it could be. There's a possibility that Nebuchadnezzar took it, because it says he put things in his God's house. But there's also a possibility because there was so much time. This is right here. We're talking about 11 years. Oh, they could have gotten rid of a lot of stuff. They could have hidden it. They could have sent it out with Jeremiah. There's a lot of things they could have done with it. Verse 18, it says, and all the vessels of the house of God, great and small, and the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king, and the treasures of the princes, and all these were brought to Babylon. Whatever was left. We don't know what was left. But then verse 21 is very interesting. It says, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. Remember, I just read that in Leviticus? For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. That's why they were in captivity for 70 years. And this is 2 Kings 25, 9 and 10. And he burnt the house of the Lord. Just think about that. To have the nerve to burn the temple. And the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. And this is how he really destroyed the city. And all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard brake down the walls of Jerusalem round about. And you know what they did? They took all of the good people and they just left the poor people. They go, oh, we don't need to support poor people. So they just left them there. So now we're going to jump ahead because I want to tell you about how in Babylon, what they did with the vessels of God. And this is Daniel chapter 5. Now we're into the part where Daniel has already interpreted dreams. He's been put in charge of the magicians and the soothsayers and all of those types of people because he had so much power which he got from God. So Nebuchadnezzar, who was so caught up in pride that God had to turn him into a beast for 7 years, and finally he looked up and saw God, and I'm going to read what he says after he was humiliated. This is verse 37 of Daniel chapter 4. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth and whose ways judgment. And those that walk in pride, he is able to abase. I want you to remember that, because this is what happens next. His son is named Belshazzar. And Belshazzar kind of forgot all about what had happened with his dad and getting turned into a beast and going around on all fours and eating grass. And then he finally realized that there's a God. So he's having a big feast. And this is Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Now just think how big this room would have to be to house 1,000 people with tables, with food. They're drinking wine. It's just a big blowout party, okay? Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives and his concubines, might drink out of them. So now he's saying, let's take those holy vessels that they robbed out of the temple and they put them in their temple to their fake gods. Let's get them out and let's drink wine out of them. This is a big mistake for him. So, verse 3. So then they brought out the vessels that were taken out of the house of God, and they all started drinking out of them. Verse 4, they drank wine and praised the God of gold and silver and bronze and iron and wood and stone. Those aren't gods. They're nothing. They can't speak. They can't hear. Right? But that's who they were worshiping. And then something very scary happened. Okay, this is verse 5. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Now listen to this. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened. This is how scared he was. And his knees were knocking against each other. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture, and then I'll show it on the camera too. This is a painting by Rembrandt that shows this is Belshazzar, and you can just see a few of the people. This lady's pouring wine out of one of those goblets. But then right here, you can see the hand, and he's writing on the wall. Now this would be pretty scary to have a human hand come out of nowhere. And he did it in front of the candlestick so that they could see it, and started writing on the wall. And it scared him. This is a painting by Rembrandt of Belshazzar's feast. Okay, so he's really in a panic and scared. The king cried out loud, "Bring the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers." And the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whoever shall be able to read this writing, I'm going to make him third in the kingdom. I'm going to put a gold chain around his neck, and I'm going to give him a scarlet robe. He's just going to make him somebody really important. Verse 8, then came in all the king's wise men, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation thereof. Okay, so Belshazzar is really getting worried now because he knows he did something very vile by taking those goblets that belonged in the temple for his party. So the queen, in verse 9, the queen which would be his mother, she remembered Daniel, that he could interpret dreams. And she said, there is a man in the kingdom in whom the spirit of the holy gods, and in the days of thy father, which is Nebuchadnezzar, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, was found in him, whom the king Nebuchadnezzar, thy father, the king, I say, thy father, made master of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers. Daniel had so much knowledge and supernatural knowledge that he put him in charge of all of these heathen astrologers and magicians. He put Daniel in charge of them. For as much as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting of dreams and showing of hard sentences and dissolving of doubts were found in this same Daniel, whom the king named Belshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will interpret this. So Daniel's brought in. I'm going to skip over some of this. And Daniel starts telling him, hey, remember what happened to your father? He got lifted up in pride, and God put him down until he looked up and praised the Lord. So he reminded him, you know all that, and you're still doing this. This is verse 23 of Daniel 5. But thou hast lifted thyself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of the house before thee. And thou and thy lords and thy wives and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold and brass, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know, and the God whose hand thy breath is in, and who are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. He's saying God has your breath in his hand, and you don't even care about him. You're not glorifying him. So this is the interpretation. Daniel gives them the interpretation. It's mene, tekel, upharsin. So now he's going to tell you what those words mean. The interpretation of the thing. Mene means God has numbered thy kingdom, and it's finished. He's given your kingdom so many days, and guess what? This is the last day. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. He's weighed in the balances and he just doesn't make it. Then upharsin, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar commanded, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet, and put a chain of gold about his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him, that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was slain. So let me tell you what was happening right there. First of all, while he was doing all this partying, he knew that the Persians were trying to take over his kingdom, but he had so much confidence that the walls of the kingdom, they were very thick. And he thought, we are so secure, I don't have to worry about them. But guess what? While they were partying, that's why he died that night. This is what they did. The river Euphrates ran right through the town. So what the Persians did was, outside of the town, they diverted the river. Now there's a narrow little passage to get under the wall where the river was flowing. And they came in that night into that party. and Belshazzar was killed. But my whole point is that if they had the goblets and the Ark of the Covenant had been there, they surely had melted it down, because they kept something as small as a goblet. I think they kept everything. But in my opinion, they didn't have the Ark. I think that because it took so long to take that city, it was in so many waves, that by that time, Zedekiah was getting the idea, hey, maybe I better put this stuff away. So next week, I'm going to tell you all the possibilities that are known today of where the Ark could be. And that's it for tonight.